The Mafia boss transforms a woman with no confidence. Her empowered posture stuns everyone. That single sentence changed everything for a woman named Clara Mitchell, a 34-year-old accountant from Chicago who had spent her entire life trying to become invisible. This is not a fairy tale. This is not a story about magic or miracles. This is the raw, unfiltered truth about what happens when someone who has forgotten their own worth crosses paths with the most unlikely teacher imaginable. Clara had perfected the art of shrinking. Her shoulders curved forward like parentheses around a body she wished would simply disappear. Her voice, when she used it at all, barely rose above a whisper. She walked through life apologizing for existing, and the world had trained her well to believe she deserved nothing more than the shadows she inhabited. The January wind cut through downtown Chicago like a blade, but Clara barely noticed. She was too focused on making herself smaller, tucking her chin into the collar of her worn gray coat, avoiding eye contact with every person who passed her on Michigan Avenue. It was a Tuesday, just past 6 in the evening, and the city was alive with people rushing home from work, their breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. Clara clutched her laptop bag against her chest like a shield, her eyes fixed on the cracked sidewalk beneath her feet. She had just left work, another day of sitting in her tiny cubicle, crunching numbers for a company that had forgotten her name despite 7 years of loyal service. Her boss, a man named Gerald who smelled of cheap cologne and cheaper cigars, had taken credit for her quarterly analysis that morning. Again. She had said nothing. She never said anything. What was the point? Her throat would close up, her palms would sweat, and the words would die somewhere between her brain and her lips, suffocated by a lifetime of being told she was too much and not enough, all at the same time. Clara's mother had been a beautiful woman, the kind of woman who walked into rooms and demanded attention without saying a word. Margaret Mitchell had married young, divorced younger, and spent the rest of her life reminding her only daughter that beauty was the only currency that mattered in this world. "Clara, you slouch like an old woman. Clara, why can't you be more like your cousin Rebecca? Clara, no man will ever want a woman who can't even look him in the eye." The words had been delivered with sighs and disappointed glances, and Clara had absorbed them like a sponge absorbs poison, slowly, completely, until they became the only voice she heard when she looked in the mirror. She was not ugly. She was not beautiful. She was simply invisible, and she had learned to prefer it that way. Invisibility was safe. Invisibility meant no one could see you fail. Invisibility meant no one could reject what they never noticed in the first place. The restaurant appeared on her right like a mirage, its warm, golden light spilling onto the frozen sidewalk. Bellini's. She had walked past it 1,000 times but had never gone inside. It was the kind of place where women wore red lipstick and men held doors, where conversations sparkled like the chandeliers that hung from the ceiling, where people like Clara Mitchell did not belong. But tonight something was different. Tonight, her feet stopped moving. Tonight, the cold had seeped so deep into her bones that the thought of walking the remaining 12 blocks to her empty apartment felt impossible. She pushed open the heavy wooden door before she could talk herself out of it. The heat hit her first, then the smell of garlic and fresh bread, and something expensive that she couldn't identify. The hostess, a young woman with perfect eyebrows and a smile that probably cost more than Clara's monthly rent, looked up from her podium and assessed Clara in a single, sweeping glance. Clara felt herself shrinking again, felt her shoulders rolling. Forward, felt the familiar burn of shame creeping up her neck. "Just a table for one," she whispered, and immediately hated the apologetic tone in her voice. One. Always one. As if that single word was a confession of failure. The hostess's smile didn't waver, but something flickered in her eyes. Pity, maybe. Or boredom. She grabbed a single menu and gestured for Clara to follow her through the crowded restaurant, past tables filled with couples and business associates and groups of friends, laughing over bottles of wine that cost more than Clara's grocery budget for the month. They stopped at a small table in the back corner, half hidden behind a pillar. Of course. The invisible woman gets the invisible table. Clara slid into her chair and accepted the menu, keeping her eyes down, waiting for the hostess to leave so she could breathe again. The menu was in Italian, with English translations underneath. Clara stared at the words without seeing them, her mind already racing through all the reasons this had been a mistake. She shouldn't be here. She couldn't afford this. The waiter would judge her. Everyone was probably already staring at the sad woman eating alone in the corner. She should leave. She should definitely leave. She was reaching for her coat when a voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "You're going to wear a hole in that menu if you keep gripping it like that." Clara's head snapped up. A man was standing beside her table, though standing didn't quite capture what he was doing. He was occupying space in a way Clara had never seen another human being occupy space. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with silver hair swept back from a face that was handsome in a weathered, dangerous way. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin, no tie, the collar of his white shirt open at the throat. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, grey and deep and impossible to read. He was old enough to be her father, maybe 60, maybe older. But there was nothing fatherly about the way he was looking at her. He was looking at her like he could see her. "I'm sorry," Clara stammered, immediately releasing her death grip on the menu. "I'm sorry." The man's eyebrows rose. "That's 3 apologies in 10 seconds, and I haven't even introduced myself." He didn't wait for an invitation before pulling out the chair across from her and sitting down. "You're also going to leave if I don't stop you, and that would be a shame." Clara's mouth opened and closed like a fish. She should tell him to go away. She should be offended that a strange man had just sat down at her table uninvited. But something in his manner, something in the way he settled into the chair like he owned not just the chair, but the entire restaurant, kept her frozen in place. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, and there was no arrogance in the question. It was simple curiosity. Clara shook her head. "Good," he said, and something that might have been a smile flickered across his face. "Then we can skip the part where you either run away or start treating me like a museum exhibit. My name is Vincent Moretti, and you are going to have dinner with me." I couldn't." Clara's voice failed her completely, trailing off into nothing. Vincent Moretti leaned back in his chair and studied her with those storm-grey eyes. "Let me tell you what I see," he said. "I see a woman who walked into this restaurant like she was walking to her own execution. I see someone who has been apologizing for her existence since before she could form complete sentences. I see a person who has been told over and over that she takes up too much space, too much air, too much time. And I see someone who has believed that lie for so long that she has forgotten it was ever a lie at all." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. How could a stranger see all of that? How could he know? She wanted to deny it, but her throat had closed up again, and all she could do was stare at this man who had just laid her soul bare on a white tablecloth between empty wine glasses. "I don't know who hurt you," Vincent continued, his voice dropping lower. "I don't know what broke you so badly that you've spent your whole life trying to disappear. But I can tell you this, Miss—" He paused, waiting. "Mitchell," she whispered. "Clara Mitchell. Miss Mitchell." He nodded once, as if filing the name away. "You are sitting in my restaurant. This is my place. These are my people. And I have a talent for seeing what others miss. Right now what I see is a waste, not of beauty, though you have plenty of that even if you don't know it, but of potential, of fire. There's something inside you that's been smothered, and it's dying for air." Clara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Who are you?" she managed. Vincent smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. "I am a businessman," he said. "Some would say a very successful one, others would say I am a monster. The truth, as always, is somewhere in between. But that's not important right now. What's important is that you are about to make a choice." "A choice?" "You can leave." Vincent gestured toward the door. "You can walk out of here, go home to your empty apartment, eat whatever sad meal you have waiting in your refrigerator, and continue living your half-life. Continue being invisible. Continue apologizing for breathing." Clara flinched at the accuracy of his words. "Or," he continued, "you can stay. You can have dinner with me. And over the next few hours I will tell you things that will make you uncomfortable, I will ask you questions that you won't want to answer. I will push you in ways that will feel cruel. But I promise you this, Clara Mitchell. If you stay, if you listen, if you are brave enough to hear the truth about yourself, you will leave this restaurant a different person." Clara stared at him. Everything about this situation was insane. A strange man at a restaurant offering to transform her life. Over pasta. It sounded like the opening of a horror movie, or a delusion, or both. But there was something in his eyes, something that wasn't predatory or cruel. It was recognition. It was the look of someone who had seen the same darkness she saw in herself, and had somehow found his way through it. "Why me?" she asked. "Why are you doing this?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. "Because I wasn't always the man you see before you," he said finally. "Once, a very long time ago, I was just like you. I was invisible. I was nothing. And someone saw me, really saw me, and it saved my life." He leaned forward. "I'm not a good man, Clara. I have done things that would give you nightmares. But I pay my debts. And this is a debt I've been trying to repay for 40 years. Clara's hands were shaking. She looked toward the door, then back at this strange, compelling man who had somehow seen through every wall she had ever built. "What's it going to be, Clara Mitchell?" Vincent asked. "Invisible or seen?" The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Clara thought about her empty apartment, her empty life, her mother's voice in her head, always criticizing, always disappointed. She thought about 7 years at a job where no one knew her name. She thought about the last time someone had looked at her, really looked at her, and couldn't remember a single instance. She took a breath, then another. "I'll stay. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel, because the next revelations will change everything you think about power, confidence, and transformation. Don't miss a single second." Vincent's smile was brief but genuine. A waiter appeared as if summoned by magic, an older man with knowing eyes who clearly knew exactly who he was serving. Vincent ordered in rapid Italian, never glancing at a menu, never asking Clara what she wanted. Under normal circumstances, she would have found this presumptuous. Tonight, she found it almost comforting. One less decision to make, one less opportunity to fail. When the waiter disappeared, Vincent folded his hands on the table and looked at her with the focused attention of a surgeon about to make an incision. First, he said, "I want you to sit up straight." Clara blinked. "What?" "Your posture. It's atrocious. You're curving your spine like you're trying to fold yourself in half. Sit up." The command in his voice was undeniable. Clara found herself obeying before she could think about it, pulling her shoulders back, lifting her chin. It felt wrong, like wearing someone else's clothes. "Now hold it," Vincent said. "Don't move." Clara held. Her back ached almost immediately, the muscles protesting the unfamiliar position. "Do you know what your posture tells the world?" Vincent asked. "It tells them you're prey. It tells them you're weak, vulnerable, easily manipulated. Before you even open your mouth, before you say a single word, your body is screaming that you deserve to be overlooked, that you expect to be dismissed, and people always give you exactly what you expect." Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "The first lesson," Vincent continued, "is this: your body lies to your brain. Right now, your brain believes you are worthless because your body has been telling it that story for decades. The curve of your spine, the way you avoid eye contact, the way you make yourself physically smaller, all of it sends a constant message to your nervous system. Danger, threat, hide, disappear." "I know," Clara whispered. "I know I do that, but I can't help it." "You can," Vincent said flatly. "It will be uncomfortable. It will feel fake. Your brain will fight you every step of the way because the brain hates change, even change for the better. But your body can lead your mind just as easily as your mind has been leading your body. Sit differently, and you will start to feel differently. Stand differently, and you will start to be treated differently." Clara wanted to argue. She wanted to say it wasn't that simple, that years of therapy hadn't fixed her, that self-help books and affirmations and meditation apps hadn't fixed her, that nothing could fix her because she was fundamentally, irreparably broken. But something in Vincent's gaze stopped her. He wasn't offering her comfort. He wasn't telling her everything would be okay. He was telling her facts, cold and hard and irrefutable, and somehow that was more convincing than every reassurance she had ever received. "Tell me about your job," Vincent said, and Clara felt herself relax slightly at the change of subject. Then she realized her shoulders had started to curve again and forced them back. "I'm an accountant," she said, "at a consulting firm. Nothing exciting." "And how long have you been there?" 7 years. "In the same position?" Clara's jaw tightened. "Yes. 3 different bosses, same cubicle, same work." "Because you don't ask for promotions," Vincent said. It wasn't a question. Clara started to defend herself, then stopped. He was right. She had never asked. She had waited to be noticed, to be recognized, and recognition had never come. "Let me guess," Vincent said. "You do excellent work. Your reports are meticulous, your numbers are always accurate, and you regularly catch mistakes that others miss. But when it comes time for promotions or raises or credit, you are somehow always overlooked. Your ideas are stolen, your contributions are forgotten. You are the invisible engine that keeps everything running, and no one knows your name." Clara's eyes widened. "How do you—" "Because it's the same story," Vincent said. "Always the same story. You have built your entire professional life around being useful without being noticed. You think that if you just work hard enough, if you just keep your head down and deliver results, eventually someone will see your value. But they won't. Do you know why?" Clara shook her head. "Because you have trained them not to see you." Vincent's voice was relentless. "Every time you avoided eye contact with your boss, you told them you weren't worth looking at. Every time you let someone else take credit for your work without objecting, you told them your work wasn't worth crediting. Every time you ate lunch at your desk to avoid the break room, you told them you weren't worth knowing." The waiter arrived with a bottle of wine, poured 2 glasses, and disappeared again. Clara reached for hers with a hand that trembled slightly. "I'm not saying this to hurt you," Vincent said, and his voice softened just a fraction. "I'm saying it because it's true, and no one has ever had the decency to tell you. You are not invisible because the world is cruel. You are invisible because you have made yourself invisible, and that means you have the power to change it." Clara took a long sip of wine. It was rich and warm and probably cost more than her hourly wage. "How?" she asked. "How do I change something I've been doing my whole life?" "One choice at a time," Vincent said. "One moment at a time. Starting right now in this restaurant at this table, I want you to look around the room. Don't stare at the floor. Don't pretend you're not there. Look at the people around you, and let them see you looking." Clara's stomach lurched. "I can't. You can. You're choosing not to." Vincent's voice was firm. "Look around the room, Clara. That's all I'm asking. Just look." Clara forced herself to lift her head. Her eyes swept across the restaurant, taking in the couples. At nearby tables, the businessmen near the window, the group of women celebrating something at a large round table in the center. One of the businessmen caught her eye and smiled slightly before returning to his conversation. Clara felt heat flood her face, but she didn't look away. She kept scanning the room, kept her chin lifted, kept her shoulders back. "Good," Vincent said quietly. "That's good. How did that feel?" "Terrifying," Clara admitted. "But did you die?" Clara almost laughed. "No. No. You looked at strangers, and the world did not end. They did not point and laugh. They did not throw things at you. Most of them didn't even notice. But the few who did, they saw a woman having dinner with a companion, a woman who belongs here as much as anyone else. Not a woman apologizing for existing." Clara's breath caught in her throat. It was such a small thing looking around a restaurant, but it felt enormous. It felt like the first step on a path she had been too afraid to even see. The food began to arrive. Antipasti, fresh bread, small dishes of olive oil and aged balsamic. Vincent served her before himself, another small gesture that felt significant. No one served Clara. Clara served herself, if she remembered to eat at all, which she often didn't. "Tell me about your mother," Vincent said. Clara's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What?" "Your posture, your voice, the way you apologize for breathing. That level of self-erasure doesn't happen in a vacuum. Someone taught you. And, based on the particular flavor of your shame, I'd guess it was a woman. A mother, probably. Or maybe an aunt, a grandmother. Someone who was supposed to love you and instead taught you that you were never enough." Clara set down her fork. She had lost her appetite. "My mother is dead," she said, 5 years ago. "Stroke. I'm sorry." Vincent's voice was unexpectedly gentle. But death doesn't erase impact. In some ways, it makes it worse. You can't confront someone who's gone. You can't demand answers or apologies. You're left with all the damage and none of the closure. She wasn't... Clara started, then stopped. What was she going to say? That her mother wasn't cruel. That wasn't exactly true. Her mother had been disappointed. Perpetually, exhaustively disappointed in a daughter who would never be pretty enough, charming enough, thin enough, feminine enough. She had wielded that disappointment like a weapon, and Clara had spent her entire childhood trying to become small enough that there was nothing left to criticize. "She wanted me to be someone else," Clara said finally, "someone I could never be." "And you spent your whole life trying to prove her right," Vincent said. "Not consciously, of course, but every time you shrink, every time you hide, every time you refuse to take up space, you're confirming her judgment. You're saying, yes, I am exactly as worthless as you always said I was." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "That's not fair." "No," Vincent agreed. "It's not fair at all. But it's what happened. And until you understand it, until you really understand it, you can't change it." A tear slipped down Clara's cheek. She wiped it away quickly, embarrassed to be crying in a public restaurant. "She told me I would never amount to anything," Clara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She said I was too awkward, too plain, too strange. She said men would never want me. She said I'd end up alone." "And you believed her?" Clara nodded miserably. "I did. I believed every word." Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was different, softer somehow, more personal. "My father told me something similar," he said. "Different words, same message. He told me I was weak, that I'd never survive in this world because I didn't have what it took to fight. He said I was a disappointment to the family name." Clara looked up, surprised by the admission. "I was 12 when he said that," Vincent continued, "and I spent the next 50 years trying to prove him wrong. I built an empire. I became a man that people feared and respected. I acquired more money and power than he could have imagined. And do you know what I discovered?" Clara shook her head. "It was never enough." Vincent's smile was sad. "Because I was still trying to prove something to a man who had been dead for 30 years. I had won every battle, and I was still losing the war. I was still that 12-year-old boy, desperate for his father's approval, fighting a ghost who could never give it." Clara felt something shift in her chest. This man, this powerful, intimidating man, was just as damaged as she was. He had just found a different way to cope. "How did you stop?" she asked. "Fighting the ghost." "I haven't," Vincent admitted. "Not completely, but I've learned to recognize when I'm doing it. I've learned to ask myself, am I making this choice because it serves me, or because I'm still trying to prove something to a dead man? Most of the time, I can catch myself. Most of the time, I can choose differently. But it's a daily practice, maybe a lifetime of practice." Clara absorbed this. It was strange being spoken to like an equal by someone so clearly her superior in every way that mattered. But there was no condescension in his voice, just honesty, raw and unvarnished. "Your mother is gone," Vincent said, "but she left a tenant in your head, and that tenant is still paying rent. Every time you hear her voice criticizing you, every time you feel that familiar shame, she wins. She keeps winning, even from the grave. Is that what you want?" "No," Clara said, and she was surprised by the force in her own voice. "No, I don't want that. Then you have to evict her." Vincent's eyes held hers. You have to take back the space she's been occupying and fill it with someone new. Someone who looks at you in the mirror and sees not what she saw, but what is actually there. And what's actually there? Clara asked, genuinely uncertain. Vincent studied her for a long moment. I see a woman with intelligent eyes, he said. A woman who has survived decades of being told she was nothing and yet managed to educate herself, find a job, keep a roof over her head. I see someone who is stronger than she knows, because weak people don't survive what you've survived, they shatter. You bent, but you didn't break. That takes a spine of steel, even if you've never used it. Clara's heart was racing. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever seen anything worth seeing. I see potential, Vincent continued. Raw, untapped potential. You're a canvas that's been painted over with someone else's garbage, and underneath all that grime, there's something worth uncovering. But you're the only one who can do the uncovering. I can point you in the right direction. I can show you what's possible, but you have to want it badly enough to do the work. I want it, Clara said, and the words came from somewhere deep inside her. I'm so tired of being invisible. I'm so tired of being afraid. Good. Vincent raised his wineglass. Then let's begin. The main courses arrived. A delicate pasta with fresh seafood for Clara, a veal dish for Vincent. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, and Clara found herself actually tasting the food, actually being present in the moment. It was a strange sensation. Usually she ate mechanically, barely noticing what she put in her mouth. When she had taken the edge off her hunger, Vincent set down his fork and leaned back in his chair. Tell me, he said, what do you do when you walk into a room? Clara considered the question. I try to find a corner, she admitted, somewhere out of the way. I don't want to be in anyone's path. And when you're in a meeting at work, I sit in the back, near the door usually. Why near the door, in case I need to leave quickly? Vincent nodded slowly. You've designed your entire existence around the possibility of needing to escape, he said. You position yourself for retreat before you've even engaged. And every time you do that, you reinforce the belief that you don't belong. Clara flushed. I know it's irrational. It's not irrational, Vincent interrupted. It's a survival mechanism. At some point in your life, probably in childhood, you learned that being noticed was dangerous. Maybe your mother punished you for standing out. Maybe you were bullied for being different. Your brain learned that visibility equals pain, so it developed strategies to minimize your visibility. Clara thought about middle school. The girls who had mocked her flat chest, her frizzy hair, her unfashionable clothes, the boys who had pretended to ask her out as a joke, the teachers who had never bothered to learn her name because she never raised her hand, never caused trouble, never demanded attention. The problem, Vincent continued, is that those strategies don't serve you anymore. You're not a child in a hostile environment. You're an adult who has the power to choose who she spends time with, where she works, how she lives. But you're still operating from the survival manual you wrote when you were 12. So how do I rewrite it? Clara asked. By practicing the opposite of what your instincts tell you. Vincent leaned forward. When you walk into a room, don't find a corner. Find the center. Don't position yourself near the exit. Position yourself where you'll be seen. It will feel wrong. It will feel dangerous. But every time you do it and survive, you'll prove to your nervous system that visibility is not in fact death. Clara imagined walking into her office tomorrow and sitting at the conference table instead of against the wall. The thought made her palms sweat. Start small, Vincent said, as if reading her mind. You don't have to give a TED talk tomorrow. Just take one step outside your comfort zone every day. Make eye contact with a stranger on the train. Speak up once in a meeting. Order your coffee without apologizing for existing. I apologize to baristas, Clara admitted. I literally say sorry before I order. I know you do. Vincent's voice was gentle. And tomorrow you won't. Tomorrow you'll walk up to the counter, look the barista in the eye, and say, I'd like a medium coffee, please, without preceding it with an apology. And it will feel like jumping out of an airplane, but you'll survive, and the next day it will be slightly easier. Clara nodded slowly. One step at a time. One step at a time. Vincent agreed. Now, I want to talk about space. Space? Physical space. The way you occupy it, the way you move through it. Right now, you try to take up as little space as possible. You make yourself small. You hold your arms close to your body. You cross your legs at the ankles like you're trying to shrink your footprint on the earth. Clara looked down at herself. She was, in fact, sitting exactly as he described. Powerful people take up space, Vincent said, not in an obnoxious way. There's a difference between confident and boorish, but they don't apologize for their physical presence. They stand with their feet shoulder-width apart. They gesture when they talk. They lean back in chairs instead of perching on the edge like they're about to bolt. Clara had never thought about how she sat. It had just been automatic. Minimize, shrink, disappear. I want you to try something, Vincent said. Uncross your ankles. Put both feet flat on the floor. Let your arms rest on the armrests instead of crossed over your chest. Clara hesitated, then did as he asked. It felt shockingly exposed, like she was offering herself up on a platter. Now breathe. Vincent's voice was calm. Notice how it feels. Your instinct is to close back up, to protect yourself. Resist that instinct. Clara breathed. Her heart was pounding, but she held the position. Good. Now look at me. Not at the table, not at your plate. At me. Clara lifted her eyes to meet his. It felt almost unbearably intimate, holding someone's gaze without flinching. This is what presence looks like, Vincent said. This is how someone who knows their worth sits at a table, not hunched, not hiding, not apologizing. Open, grounded, taking up exactly the amount of space they deserve to take up, which is exactly as much space as anyone else. Clara felt something shift in her chest. It was uncomfortable, this openness, but it was also liberating, like she had been wearing a corset her entire life, and someone had finally loosened the laces. You feel it, don't you? Vincent asked. Clara nodded. She didn't trust herself to speak. That feeling is power, Vincent said. Not power over others, power over yourself, power to choose how you present yourself to the world. You've been giving that power away your whole life, letting others define you by your shrinking. Now you're taking it back. Clara blinked back tears. Why does this feel so hard? Because your brain thinks it's dangerous. Your brain has spent decades building walls to protect you, and now you're asking it to tear them down. It's going to fight you every step of the way. But the brain can be retrained. It just takes time and repetition and the willingness to be uncomfortable. The waiter appeared to clear their plates and offer dessert menus. Vincent declined with a wave of his hand, ordering espresso for both of them instead. Clara didn't object. She was learning that sometimes it was okay to let someone else take charge. I have a question, Clara said when the waiter had gone. You said you're a businessman, but the way people look at you here, the way the staff treats you, it's more than that, isn't it? Vincent's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. What have you heard? Nothing specific, just the way you carry yourself, the way you talked about doing things that would give me nightmares. Clara swallowed hard. Are you dangerous? Vincent considered the question. I am a man who has built an organization that operates in certain spheres of business, he said carefully. Some of those spheres exist, in gray areas of the law. Some of those spheres require a certain flexibility with moral boundaries. Clara's heart rate spiked. You're talking about organized crime. I'm talking about power, Vincent said. Power in this city takes many forms. Some of it is legal, some of it isn't. The men who built this country, the Rockefellers and Carnegies and Morgans, they weren't operating in a vacuum of pure ethics. They did what was necessary to accumulate power, and then they used that power to reshape the world. Clara should have been terrified. She was sitting across from a man who had just admitted to being essentially a crime boss. But somehow, terror wasn't what she felt. What she felt was fascination. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you asked. Vincent's voice was matter-of-fact. And because you deserve to know who you're talking to. I am not a good man, Clara. I told you that at the beginning, but I am an honest one, at least with people who earn it. You've been honest with me tonight. You've been braver than you know. That earns you truth in return. Clara absorbed this. I should probably be running away right now, she admitted. Probably, Vincent agreed. But you're not, are you? Clara shook her head slowly. No, I'm not. Why? Because... Clara paused, searching for the right words. Because you're the first person who's ever seen me. Really seen me. And even if you're dangerous, even if everything about this is crazy, I don't want to go back to being invisible. Not yet. Not when I'm finally starting to understand what being visible might feel like. Vincent was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. You're braver than you think, Clara Mitchell, he said, and smarter than you've been told. Those are dangerous qualities in a woman. They're also exactly the qualities that will save you. The espresso arrived, dark and aromatic in tiny white cups. Clara wrapped her hands around the warmth and let herself sit with the complexity of this moment. The danger and the hope, the fear and the exhilaration. If you're still with this story, I want you to take a moment right now and drop a comment saying, I believe in my transformation. Let me know you're here, that you're listening, that this story is reaching you. Vincent sipped his espresso and set the cup down with careful precision. Let me tell you a story, he said, about how I became the man you see today. Clara leaned forward, drawn in despite herself. I grew up in a neighborhood on the south side that doesn't exist anymore, Vincent began. Not officially. The streets are still there, the buildings, but the community, the people I knew, they've all been pushed out by development and gentrification, scattered to the winds. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. My father was a dock worker, hard man, hands like sandpaper, heart to match. My mother cleaned houses for wealthy families on the north side. She'd come home exhausted, smelling like other people's laundry, and my father would drink and criticize everything she'd done wrong that day. Clara recognized the dynamic. Different details, same poison. I was small for my age, Vincent continued, skinny. Wore glasses so thick the other kids called me Coke bottles. I was picked on constantly, beaten up regularly. My father's response was to beat me harder at home for being weak enough to get beaten elsewhere. Clara's heart ached for the child Vincent had been. When I was 14, I decided something had to change, Vincent said. Not because I had some revelation, but because I was tired. Tired of being afraid, tired of being hurt, tired of waiting for someone to save me and realizing no one was coming. So what did you do? Vincent's smile was thin. I started watching. The boys who beat me up, they weren't operating randomly. They had a structure, a hierarchy. The real power wasn't with the ones throwing punches, it was with the ones giving orders. So I started learning how the hierarchy worked, who answered to whom, what motivated people, what scared them. Clara was riveted. She had never thought about power this analytically. I discovered that most people are motivated by a very simple set of things, Vincent continued. Fear, greed, love, pride. If you understand which lever to pull for which person, you can move them wherever you want them to go. That sounds manipulative, Clara said quietly. It is manipulative, Vincent agreed. But manipulation isn't inherently evil. Every time you smile at a stranger to make them feel comfortable, you're manipulating their emotional state. Every time a parent uses positive reinforcement on a child, they're manipulating behavior. The question isn't whether manipulation is happening, it's always happening. It's whether it's being used for good or ill. Clara considered this. It was a perspective she had never encountered before. When I was 16, I started working for a man named Dominic Castellano, Vincent said. He ran a small operation in our neighborhood. Nothing. Major. Some gambling, some loans. I was a runner at first, carrying messages, delivering packages, but Dom saw something in me. He said I had eyes that noticed things other people missed. Vincent paused to sip his espresso. Dom became the father I never had, he continued. He taught me things, how to read people, how to speak in a way that commands attention, how to walk into a room like you own it, even when you're terrified inside. He taught me that power isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about understanding what people need and being in a position to provide it or withhold it. Clara thought about her own life. How she had spent years trying to be valuable by making herself useful, but never understanding that usefulness without visibility was worthless. By the time I was 25, I was running my own crew, Vincent said. By 35, I had absorbed or eliminated every competitor in the region. By 45, I was the most powerful man in this city's shadow economy. He said it without pride or shame, just fact. But here's what I learned along the way, Vincent continued, leaning forward. Power isn't what people think it is. It's not money or muscle or territory. Those are just tools. Real power is the ability to control your own story, to decide who you are, how you're seen, what you represent. Everything else is just currency. Clara felt the words land like a physical impact. You've been letting other people write your story for 34 years, Vincent said. Your mother, your bosses, the bullies from middle school, everyone who ever looked at you and decided you were nothing. You took their opinions and you made them your truth. I didn't know how to do anything else, Clara whispered. I know. Vincent's voice was unexpectedly gentle. Neither did I once. But you're learning now. And the beautiful thing about stories is that they can be rewritten. It's not easy. It takes time and work and a willingness to be uncomfortable. But it can be done. Clara looked at this man, this powerful, dangerous, complicated man, and saw herself reflected in his journey. Different circumstances, different scale, but the same fundamental struggle. The fight to matter, the fight to be seen, the fight to take up space in a world that seemed designed to crush them. What happened to your father? She asked. He died when I was 22, Vincent said. Liver failure. All those years of drinking finally caught up with him. I paid for his hospital stay, paid for his funeral, watched them lower him into the ground and felt nothing. Clara understood that nothing, the strange emptiness where grief should have been. I thought I would feel relief, Vincent continued, or triumph. I had become everything he said I couldn't be. I had proved him wrong 1,000 times over, but standing at his grave, all I felt was tired, because I realized I was still fighting him, still trying to prove something to a man who was never capable of seeing my worth, even when he was alive. Clara felt tears slip down her cheeks. That's exactly how I felt when my mother died. I know, Vincent said. I recognized it in you the moment you walked into this restaurant. That hunted look, that desperate need for approval that can never be satisfied because the person whose approval you need is gone forever. Clara wiped her eyes with her napkin. So what do we do? How do we stop fighting ghosts? Vincent was quiet for a moment. We don't stop entirely, he said finally. Not completely, but we can learn to recognize when we're doing it. We can learn to pause to ask ourselves, am I making this choice for me or for someone who's not here to see it anymore? And slowly, over time, we can shift the balance. More choices for ourselves, fewer for the ghosts. Clara thought about all the choices she had made, or failed to make, to please a mother who would never be pleased. The safe job, the colorless apartment, the invisible life. What would it look like, she asked, slowly, if I started making choices for myself? Vincent smiled. That's the question, isn't it? I can't answer it for you. Your choices are not my choices. But I can tell you this. The first step is usually the scariest, and the first step is usually some version of standing up straight and looking someone in the eye. Clara laughed despite herself. It always comes back to posture, doesn't it? Always, Vincent agreed. The body leads the mind. Change how you hold yourself, and you change how you think about yourself. Change how you think about yourself, and you change how you act. Change how you act, and you change your life. The evening had deepened while they talked. The restaurant had emptied somewhat, the dinner rush fading into the quieter rhythms of late-night patrons lingering over drinks and dessert. Clara realized with a start that they had been talking for nearly 4 hours. I should let you go, she said, though part of her never wanted this conversation to end. You must have important things to do. Vincent shook his head. This is important, he said. Possibly the most important thing I'll do this week. Building an empire is easy, Clara. You just need ruthlessness and a tolerance for risk. But changing a life, that's rare. That's precious. Clara felt tears threaten again. She had cried more tonight than she had in years. I want you to do something for me, Vincent said. Tomorrow morning, when you wake up, I want you to stand in front of your mirror. And I want you to spend 2 minutes just looking at yourself, not criticizing, not cataloguing flaws, just looking, seeing yourself as you actually are. Clara's stomach clenched. That sounds terrifying. It is terrifying. Vincent's voice was matter-of-fact. The mirror is most people's worst enemy because they've been trained to see it as a judge instead of a witness. Tomorrow, I want you to retrain that relationship. Just observe. No commentary. No judgment. Clara nodded slowly. I'll try. Then, Vincent continued, I want you to get dressed in something that makes you feel powerful. Not sexy, not fashionable. Powerful. Something that makes you feel like you could take on the world if you had to. Clara thought about her wardrobe. Greys and browns and blacks. Soft fabrics, shapeless cuts. Nothing powerful about any of it. I don't think I own anything like that, she admitted. Then that's your first purchase, Vincent said. Before anything else, before you go to work, before you start your day, you're going to find a store that's open, and you're going to buy one item of clothing that makes you feel unstoppable. Clara started to object. I can't afford, then stopped herself. This was exactly the pattern Vincent had been describing, objecting before trying, limiting herself before anyone else had the chance. Okay, she said instead. One item. Good. Vincent's approval was warm. Then at work, I want you to do one thing differently. Just one. It could be as small as speaking up once in a meeting, or walking into your boss's office and asking for credit you deserve. Whatever feels like a stretch. Clara thought about Gerald, her boss, about all the times he had stolen her work without acknowledgement. Tomorrow, that felt impossible. But maybe she could start smaller. There's a meeting tomorrow afternoon, she said slowly. I usually sit in the back. Maybe I could sit at the table instead. Perfect. Vincent nodded. Sit at the table. Make eye contact with at least one person. Speak at least. Once, even if it's just to agree with something someone else says. Clara felt her palms sweat at the thought, but she also felt something else, something that might have been excitement. What happens after that, she asked. After that, you do it again. Vincent's voice was steady. And again, and again. Some days you'll fail. Some days you'll retreat to your corner and your silence and your invisibility. That's okay. Progress isn't linear. The only failure is giving up entirely. Clara absorbed. It sounded simple in theory. She knew from experience it would be anything but simple in practice. I want to give you something, Vincent said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. It was simple. Cream-colored stock, black ink, just his name and a phone number. Nothing else. If you ever need someone to remind you who you're becoming, Vincent said, call this number. Not often. I'm a busy man. But sometimes when we're changing, we need someone outside our usual world to remind us that change is possible. Clara took the card carefully as if it might bite her. Why are you doing this, she asked. Really, what do you get out of it? Vincent was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, more vulnerable. I told you I've done things that would give you nightmares, he said. And I meant it. I've made choices that hurt people. I've built a world where power flows through channels that the light of day would never approve of. I've done what I had to do to survive, and then I did more than I had to because I could. Clara listened without judgment. She sensed he needed to say this. But there's a ledger, Vincent continued. Inside all of us, there's a ledger, and at a certain point you start wanting to balance it. You start looking for ways to tip the scales, not to erase what you've done. Nothing erases that, but to add something to the other side. Clara thought she understood. Redemption might be impossible, but contribution was always available. You saw me tonight, Clara said slowly. You saw someone who was drowning and you threw them a rope. That's what this is about, isn't it? Vincent's smile was tired and sad, and somehow beautiful. That's part of it, he admitted. But there's something else too. What? Vincent paused, choosing his words. I have a daughter, he said. About your age. We haven't spoken in 8 years. She wanted nothing to do with my world, my life, my legacy. I don't blame her. But sometimes when I see a woman like you, smart, kind, struggling to find her way, I think about her. I wonder what I would say to her if I had the chance, what advice I would give. Clara felt tears well up again. So I'm a proxy, she said, a stand-in for the conversation you can't have. Vincent shook his head. No, you're Clara Mitchell, unique, valuable, worth saving in your own right. But yes, there's an element of that. Every young woman I help is a message in a bottle, a letter to a daughter, who will probably never read it. Clara reached across the table and, surprising herself, put her hand on his. Thank you, she said, for seeing me, for talking to me like I matter. Vincent's hand turned under hers, giving her fingers a brief squeeze before withdrawing. You do matter, he said. Never forget that. No matter what happens after tonight, remember this. You matter. Your existence has value. Your thoughts deserve to be heard. Your needs deserve to be met. You are not invisible unless you choose to be, and after tonight you know better than to make that choice. The waiter appeared with the check. Vincent signed it without looking at the total. Presumably money was not a concern for a man who owned the restaurant. Clara watched, taking mental notes. That casual confidence with money, that assumption that of course he could afford whatever he wanted. She had never felt that way about anything. I should walk you out, Vincent said, rising. It's late, and this neighborhood gets interesting after midnight. Clara stood too, suddenly awkward. What was the protocol for ending an evening like this? A handshake? A hug? Vincent made the decision for her, taking her hand in both of his. Remember what I told you, he said. Mirror. Power clothing. One different choice. Start small. Build momentum. I'll remember, Clara promised. And Clara? Vincent's eyes held hers. Don't let anyone, including yourself, tell you that you can't change. You can. You will. I've seen enough people. Transform to know a butterfly when I see one, even when she's still in the cocoon. Clara felt her throat tighten. I don't know how to thank you. Don't thank me. Vincent released her hand. Prove me right. That's all the thanks I need. They walked through the restaurant together, Vincent nodding to various staff members as they passed. Everyone stepped aside for him. Everyone treated him with a respect that bordered on reverence. Clara watched, learning. This was what presence looked like. This was how someone who knew their worth moved through the world. At the door, the cold Chicago night hit them like a slap. Clara shivered and pulled her coat tighter. Can I call you a car? Vincent asked. No, Clara started to refuse automatically, then stopped. Actually, yes, that would be nice, thank you. Vincent smiled. Good. You're learning already. Within minutes, a black sedan appeared at the curb. The driver got out and opened the back door for Clara, like she was someone important. Where? To? Vincent asked. Clara gave her address. A modest apartment in Rogers Park. Nothing compared to this neighborhood. Get some sleep, Vincent said. Tomorrow is the first day of your new life. You'll need your strength. Clara climbed into the car, then looked back at him through the window. He was standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, a slight smile on his weathered face. Thank you, she said again, knowing the words were inadequate. Go, Vincent said, and remember, you matter. The car pulled away from the curb, and Clara watched through the rear window as Vincent's figure grew smaller and smaller until he disappeared entirely. Clara barely slept that night. Her mind was racing with everything Vincent had said, everything she had felt, everything that might be possible if she was brave enough to try. She woke before her alarm, which was unusual. Usually she hit snooze 3 or 4 times, dreading the day ahead. But this morning was different. This morning felt like the beginning of something. She went to the bathroom and stood in front of the mirror, just looking, she told herself. No judgment, just Observation. It was harder than she expected. Her eyes immediately went to the flaws, the dark circles, the limp hair, the pallid skin. But she forced herself to keep looking, to see beyond the imperfections to the whole person. She had her father's eyes, she realized. She had almost forgotten. He had died when she was small, and her mother had never talked about him. But his eyes had been blue like hers, kind eyes according to her few memories. She had good cheekbones, hidden beneath years of chronic tension but still there. She had strong hands, capable hands. She had a body that had carried her through 34 years of life without major illness or injury. 2 minutes stretched into 5, into 10. Clara looked at herself as if seeing a stranger, and found that the stranger wasn't as terrible as she had always believed. One item of clothing, she reminded herself. Something that makes you feel powerful. She thought about the stores that would be open early. There was a boutique on her way to the train station that she usually hurried past, intimidated by the well-dressed mannequins in the window. Today, she decided. Today I go inside. She showered and dressed in her usual grey, but with a new awareness of how the colours washed out her complexion, how the shapeless cuts hid her figure in all the wrong ways. Tomorrow, she would start to change this. But first, the boutique. The morning was cold but clear, the January sun sparkling off dirty snow. Clara walked differently than usual. She tried to keep her shoulders back, her chin up. It felt unnatural, but she persisted. The boutique was called Artemis, with an elegant silver sign above the door. Clara hesitated on the sidewalk, her old instincts screaming at her to keep walking. But then she thought of Vincent's voice. The body leads the mind. She pushed open the door. The interior was warm and scented with something floral. A saleswoman looked up from behind the counter, an elegant older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes. "Good morning," she said, assessing Clara in a single glance. "Looking for anything in particular?" Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to apologize and leave, but she forced herself to hold the woman's gaze. "I need something that makes me feel powerful," she said, and she was surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. The saleswoman's expression shifted. Something like approval flickered across her face. "I know exactly what you need," she said. "Follow me." 20 minutes later, Clara left Artemis carrying a bag that contained a silk blouse in deep burgundy, a color she never would have chosen for herself. But when she had tried it on, something had shifted. The rich color brought out the blue in her eyes, the warmth in her skin. The tailored cut emphasized curves she usually tried to hide. "You look like a woman who knows what she wants," the saleswoman had said, "even if you don't know it yet." Clara had paid more than she usually spent on clothes in a month, and for once she didn't regret it. At the coffee shop, she ordered her medium coffee without apologizing. The barista didn't seem to notice anything different, but Clara noticed. She noticed that the world didn't end when she made a request without preceding it with sorry. At work, she walked to her cubicle and sat down, but something was different. She hung her coat on the back of her chair instead of shoving it under her desk. She adjusted her monitor so she could look up and see the office instead of hiding behind it. When the afternoon meeting came, Clara's heart was pounding so hard she thought she might pass out. The conference room was filling up. The usual suspects, her colleagues who didn't know her name, her boss Gerald, who stole her work without credit. Clara hesitated at the door. The back corner was empty, as usual. No one would notice if she slipped in there, if she made herself small and invisible and safe. But she thought about Vincent. She thought about the mirror that morning, and the burgundy blouse hidden under her grey cardigan, and the coffee she had ordered without apologizing. She walked to the table and sat down, not in the back, at the table. Gerald looked up, startled. "Clara? What are you doing here?" "I'm attending the meeting," Clara said, and her voice was steadier than she expected. "Like I do every week." Gerald's eyebrows rose, but he said nothing more. Other people filed in and the meeting began. Clara sat at the table and listened. When someone made a point about the quarterly projections that she disagreed with, her hand started to rise. She forced herself to let it keep rising. "Actually," she said, and her voice came out thin and reedy. She cleared her throat. "Actually, I think those numbers might be off. The variance in the third quarter account seems too high based on the seasonal patterns from previous years." Everyone looked at her. Clara felt heat flood her face, felt the urge to apologize and take it back. But she didn't. And something remarkable happened. Gerald frowned, pulled up the numbers on his laptop, and checked. "Clara's right," he said slowly, as if the words surprised him. "Good catch." It was 3 words. 3 words of acknowledgement after 7 years of invisibility. But to Clara, it felt like a revolution. After the meeting, a woman named Sarah from the marketing department approached her. "I've worked here for 2 years," Sarah said, "and I don't think I've ever heard you speak in a meeting. That was a great catch." "Thank you," Clara said, and she managed to make eye contact, managed to smile. "We should get coffee sometime," Sarah said. "I feel like I don't know anyone on the finance side." A week ago, Clara would have mumbled something non-committal and never followed up. But today was different. "I'd like that," she said. "How about tomorrow?" Sarah grinned. "It's 3rd date." Clara walked back to her cubicle feeling like she was floating. 1 meeting, 1 comment, 1 connection. It was nothing in the grand scheme of things. And it was everything. That night, she pulled out Vincent's business card and looked at it for a long time. She thought about calling, about telling him about her day. But something stopped her. He had told her to call if she needed reminding. But today, she didn't need reminding. Today, she remembered on her own. She put the card in her wallet next to her ID, a talisman for harder days. The changes came slowly at first, then all at once. Clara started wearing color. Not every day, but more days than not. The burgundy blouse became her armor, and she built an arsenal around it. A blazer that actually fit. Shoes that made her stand taller. Earrings that caught the light when she turned her head. She started eating lunch in the break room instead of at her desk. At first, she just sat alone and read. But gradually she started responding when people spoke to her. Responding and then initiating. Within a week, she had a lunch group. Sarah from marketing, 2 guys from IT, an older woman from HR who had the best gossip in the building. Her boss, Gerald, noticed. Of course he did. Even Gerald couldn't ignore a transformation this dramatic. At first he seemed suspicious, like Clara was planning something. Then he seemed uncomfortable, like her new confidence was somehow a rebuke of everything he had gotten away with before. And finally he seemed to recalibrate, treating her with a respect he had never shown before. At the next monthly review, Clara asked for a raise. The words came out like she was reciting someone else's script, but they came out. She listed her accomplishments, her contributions, the value she brought to the team. She made eye contact. She didn't apologize. Gerald looked stunned. He said he would have to check with HR. But 3 days later, Clara got an email confirming a 15% increase effective immediately. She called Vincent that night. "It worked," she said when he answered. "The things you told me, they worked. Tell me." Vincent's voice was warm. Clara told him about the raise, the lunch group, the way people were starting to know her name. She told him about the coffee shop, where the barista now greeted her by sight. She told him about the neighbor in her apartment building who had invited her to a book club, and how she had said yes instead of making up an excuse. "Good," Vincent said. "Keep going." "I feel like a different person," Clara admitted. "Is that normal?" "You are a different person," Vincent said. "Or rather, you're becoming the person you always were underneath all the armor. The shrinking was never you. It was just a survival strategy. Now you're surviving differently." Clara thought about this. It made sense. She hadn't gained anything new. She had just stopped hiding what was already there. "I'm proud of you, Clara," Vincent said, "for what it's worth." "It's worth a lot," Clara said, and meant it. Spring came to Chicago slowly, grudgingly, as it always did. But Clara barely noticed the lingering cold, because inside, she was finally warming up. She had started going to the gym, not because she wanted to lose weight or look different, but because she wanted to feel strong. And she was feeling strong. stronger than she had ever felt in her life. She had started taking an improv class on Thursday nights. It was terrifying, the first few sessions. Standing up in front of strangers, making things up on the spot, risking looking foolish. But she was learning that foolishness wasn't fatal, that laughter wasn't always cruel, that sometimes, when she took a risk and failed, the failure was actually kind of funny. She had started dating. Just a little, just testing the waters. She had gone on 3 dates in the past month, more than she had been on in the previous 3 years. None of them had led anywhere, but that wasn't the point. The point was that she was out there, visible, taking up space. At work, she had been promoted. Not just a raise this time, but an actual new title, Senior Financial Analyst. Gerald had been forced to acknowledge her publicly, to praise her in front of the entire department. She still thought about Vincent often. They had talked a few more times, brief conversations, check-ins mostly. He seemed genuinely pleased by her progress, though he deflected her gratitude with characteristic gruffness. "You did the work," he told her. "I just pointed you in the right direction." But Clara knew better. He had done more than point. He had seen her when no one else could see her. He had believed in her when she couldn't believe in herself. He had given her a precious gift, the gift of being witnessed, truly witnessed in all her broken glory. She didn't expect to see him again. Not really. The world Vincent moved in was not her world, and their paths had no reason to cross. But then, on a warm evening in late April, she walked into a gallery opening that a colleague had invited her to, and there he was. He was standing near the back of the gallery, surrounded by men in expensive suits, who seemed to hang on his every word. His silver hair was slightly longer than she remembered, his face perhaps a bit more lined, but his presence was undimmed. That quality of taking up space, of mattering, that she had worked so hard to cultivate in herself. Their eyes met across the crowded room. Vincent's expression shifted, surprise, then recognition, then something that looked almost like pride. He excused himself from his companions and walked toward her. "Clara Mitchell," he said. "Look at you." Clara smiled. She was wearing a red dress she had bought the week before, bold, fitted, unapologetic. Her hair was styled differently, swept back from her face instead of hiding behind it. She was standing up straight without having to think about it. "Vincent," she said, "I almost didn't recognize you without a table between us." Vincent laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine. "You've changed," he said. "You've really changed." Clara nodded. "Thanks to you. Thanks to yourself." Vincent's voice was firm. "I gave you permission. You did everything else." They stood together, 2 people who had shared an unlikely evening 4 months ago, and Clara felt the full weight of what had happened since. She had become someone new, someone she actually liked. "Can I buy you a drink?" Vincent asked. "For old time's sake." Clara smiled. "I'd like that." They found a quiet corner of the gallery away from the crowd. Vincent ordered 2 glasses of wine, and they settled into easy conversation. "Tell me everything," he said. Clara told him. About the promotion and the dating and the improv class, about the lunch group and the book club and the neighbor who had become a friend, about the mornings when she looked in the mirror and didn't flinch. Vincent listened with apparent satisfaction. "It's remarkable," he said when she finished. "Most people who are given the tools to change don't use them. They nod along, say they understand, and then go right back to their old patterns." "You didn't." Clara thought about this. "I wanted it badly enough," she said. "I was so tired of being invisible. The pain of staying the same finally became worse than the pain of changing." Vincent nodded slowly. "That's always the tipping point," he said. "The moment when the familiar hell becomes worse than the unknown heaven. Most people never reach it. They prefer the devil they know." Clara sipped her wine. "What about you?" she asked. "Has anything changed for you?" Vincent's expression flickered. Something, maybe. Something she couldn't read. "I called my daughter," he said quietly. "A few weeks ago. For the first time in 8 years." Clara's heart leaped. "Vincent, that's wonderful. What happened?" She hung up on me, Vincent said, and his smile was sad. But she picked up the phone first. That's more than I expected. Clara reached out and touched his arm. That's a start, she said. Vincent nodded. That's a start, he agreed. That's all any of us can hope for. They talked for another hour about life and change and the strange alchemy of transformation. Clara found herself sharing things she had never told anyone, her fears, her hopes, her lingering doubts. Sometimes I worry it's all going to collapse, she admitted, that I'll wake up one morning and be the old Clara again, the invisible one. Vincent considered this. You might, he said. There will be bad days. Days when all your old patterns come flooding back and you feel like you've lost everything you gained. That's normal. Clara felt her chest tighten. But here's the difference, Vincent continued. Before, you didn't know any other way. Now you do. You know what it feels like to take up space, to be seen, to matter. You can't unknow that. Even on your worst days, that knowledge is there, waiting for you to remember it. Clara felt tears prick at her eyes. Thank you, she said, for everything, for that first night, for seeing me when I couldn't see myself. Vincent's eyes were surprisingly soft. You were always worth seeing, Clara. You just needed someone to show you the mirror without the distortions. They parted that evening with a warm embrace, something Clara never would have initiated 4 months ago. Take care of yourself, Vincent said. Keep growing. I will, Clara promised. And Vincent? Try your daughter again. Keep trying. Vincent smiled. I will, he said. We're both works in progress, aren't we? Clara watched him walk away, surrounded by his entourage, returning to a world she would never be part of. And she felt, for the first time in her life, completely at peace with who she was. Clara stood in front of the full-length mirror in her new apartment, a nicer place in a better neighborhood, paid for by the senior position she now held at a consulting firm that had recruited her away from Gerald's company. She was getting dressed for a party, not just any party, her party. A celebration of her 35th birthday, thrown by the friends she had somehow collected over the past year. Friends who knew her name, who called just to talk, who showed up when she needed them. The woman in the mirror wore an emerald green dress that hugged her curves. Her hair was shorter now, styled in a way that framed her face instead of hiding it. She stood up straight without thinking about it, shoulders back, chin lifted. She looked powerful, and she felt powerful. The transformation had not been easy. There had been setbacks, days when she retreated to her old patterns, days when the voice in her head sounded exactly like her mother's, and nothing Vincent had taught her seemed to matter. But she had kept going. One step at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of courage followed by another, until the courage became habit, and the habit became identity. She had started mentoring other women at work, women who reminded her of herself. Talented but invisible, capable but overlooked. She told them what Vincent had told her. The body leads the mind. Change how you hold yourself, and you change how you think about yourself. Change how you think about yourself, and you change your life. Some of them listened, some of them didn't. That was okay. She had planted seeds. What they did with those seeds was up to them. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, who had become her closest friend. On my way. Can't wait to celebrate you. Clara smiled. Celebrate you, what a concept. A year ago, she would have found a way to make the celebration about everyone else. She would have insisted on no presents, no fuss, no attention. Now she let people celebrate her. She let them see her. She let them love her. She thought about Vincent sometimes. They had talked a few more times over the past year, brief conversations, updates on their respective journeys. His daughter had agreed to meet him for coffee. It hadn't gone well, but it hadn't gone terribly either. They were trying, that was all anyone could do. Clara picked up her phone and typed a quick message to the number on the business card she still kept in her wallet. 1 year since Bellini's. Thank you for changing my life. Clara. The response came almost immediately. You changed your own life. I just handed you the keys. "Happy birthday, Clara. Keep shining." Clara felt tears well up, but they were happy tears. Good tears. She gave herself one last look in the mirror. The woman looking back at her was not the same woman who had walked into that restaurant on a cold January night. That woman had been invisible, apologetic, defeated. This woman was powerful. This woman was seen. This woman mattered. Clara Mitchell took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and walked out to meet her guests. 3 years later, Clara received a letter in the mail, handwritten, no return address, postmarked from Italy. She opened it with trembling hands. "Dear Clara, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I've been fighting something for a while now, something that finally won. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want you to know that night at Bellini's was not just about you. It was about me, too. All those years building an empire, accumulating power, commanding respect. And the moment I'm most proud of is sitting in a restaurant telling an invisible woman that she deserved to be seen. You asked me once why I did it. I told you about my daughter, about the debt I was trying to repay. That was true, but there was more. I saw myself in you, Clara, the frightened child who learned to disappear, the teenager who believed he would never amount to anything, the young man who built walls so high no one could touch him. You taught me something that night. You taught me that the walls can come down, that even after decades of hiding, we can choose to be seen. Your courage, yes, courage, in staying at that table, in listening, in changing, reminded me that transformation is always possible. My daughter and I reconciled, not fully, not perfectly, but we had 3 years of imperfect reconciliation before the end, 3 years I wouldn't have had if I hadn't seen your bravery and let it inspire my own. Keep going, Clara. Keep being seen. Keep taking up space. And when you meet someone who is invisible, who is hiding, who has forgotten their own worth, see them, the way I saw you. That's the only legacy that matters. With gratitude and admiration, Vincent. Clara read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer where she kept her most precious things, and went back to work. She had women to mentor, stories to change, lives to transform. She had become the person Vincent saw in her that first night, and she would spend the rest of her life passing that gift along. If you watched until here, it's because you liked this story. Leave a comment saying I watched until the end, so I can get to know you and know who really loves the stories here on this channel. And please, if this story touched you, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Check if you're already subscribed to this channel, because stories like this change lives and you deserve to be part of this journey. The Mafia boss transforms a woman with no confidence. Her empowered posture stuns everyone. And sometimes, in the most unlikely moments, with the most unlikely teachers, we discover that we were never invisible at all. We were just waiting for someone brave enough to see us.